Hi everyone, welcome to this Java tutorial. Today we're just going to have a quick look at some issues with passing data to functions as parameters. So here we've got an integer data type, it's num, and it's storing the value 1. I'm going to call a function and send it that data. Now what's happening is a copy of the data is sent to the function to be processed, not the original data. Okay, so when I call display num and I send it a copy of the data, it's going to display the number 1. Next, we're going to call another function called change num. We'll send it a copy of this value and we'll change it. Maybe we multiply it by 5. Okay. Now when we display num again, we might expect the new value to be 5 because change num changed the number. But actually, we're only sending copies of this data into these functions. So the original data that's stored is not changed. So when we call display num, we will see 1 again. Now this is how Java plays with primitive data types. And in Java there are 8 primitive data types: int, double, long, short, float, char, boolean, and byte. How about arrays? If I have an array of integers referenced by a variable nums and I send that data into a function, what will happen? Well, actually, we're not sending a copy of the data this time. We're sending a copy of this reference variable. Okay? Now, this reference variable that we're sending also points to this data collection. So it will display all of these values. Now let's call another function, change nums. Again, we're not sending a copy of the data, we're sending a copy of the reference to the data. So when we change nums, because this is also pointing at this data set will change. So be very careful. If you're passing arrays around your computer programs and you don't want to change the original array, be careful. Okay, we'll look at an example of this in a moment. So finally, when we call display nums, again, we're sending it a reference to the data set. Whatever is currently in that data set is what will be displayed. And remember, in this step, we changed the data. We will see different values. Okay, the 1693712, it's gone forever. Now just to see that in action, let's bring up our IDE. I've already created very quickly a data set. There's a quick way to do it in Java. I'm now going to call a function, display nums. Hopefully we will see 531976. Then I'm going to do something to change those values. And then we're going to display nums again. The question is, will we still see 531976? So let's code these two functions, and then we will have a look and see what's going on. So public static void, not returning anything, display nums. This function processes an integer array. So I'm just going to call it x. And all it does, it loops through the array and displays each value. Now let's do it this way. We'll say x, I with a space after each value. And when the for loop is finished, I'm just going to put in an extra system.out.println this time. so that the next time we call display nums, we start on a new line. Okay, that's what that's for. Now let's code the change nums function. Again, we're not returning anything. And it processes an integer array. I'm just going to call it y. Doesn't matter what you call it, it's just a parameter. Now let's loop through y. And what we're going to do is, every time we visit an element in the y array, we're going to multiply it by 2. Okay, so 531976 will become 10, 6, 2, 18, 14, 12. Okay, now then, let's just make sure we know what we're doing here. I'm going to send the data to the function, and hopefully we will see 531976. Then I'm going to call this function, send it the data, and it's going to update each element by multiplying it by 2. And then we'll call display nums. The question is, are we going to see 531976, or will we see 10, 6, 2, 18, 14, 12? Let's find out. Okay, we passed a reference to the data, we passed a copy of the reference to the data. So this copy also references the data. So when we changed the data, we changed the original data. Okay, so be very careful if you're working with a data set and you're sending it to functions and you don't want the original data to change. You'll have to do some research and see if you can figure out how to maybe create a clone of the original data set and pass a reference to the clone. That's probably a strategy for dealing with this issue.